NBA is pure dance. So it's pure dance, and it might be hip hop, it might be lyrical, it could be any style of dance. The other style of cheerleading, the stunts and the tumbles, which everybody knows as cheerleading, that's most people know as cheerleading, has a small element of dance in it, but it's stunting and tumbling, arm motions, jumps, all very, very synchronized, very much like, there's a crossover with some of the skills. So synchronization, timing, transitions, all of those kind of things cross over. But you've got one that is ground bound, stays on the floor, it's dance. Okay, we do jumps, but it's dance. You very seldom do any climbing on top of each other because you might lift somebody, but you don't climb. And the other one is very much linked to gymnastics.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest this episode is Pat Hawkins, CEO of UK Cheerleading Association. Pat has been instrumental in growing UKCA to more than 200,000 members, but her first love was dance. We hear how she successfully developed a career in the insurance industry whilst working as a professional dancer and dance teacher, before being hooked by cheerleading. During the episode, Pat opens up about the challenges of building consensus and the ongoing journey to becoming officially recognised as a sport. Enjoy the show. Right, really excited to have Pat Hawkins with us today, Chief Exec of UKCA, the UK Cheerleading Association. She's been instrumental in growing UKCA as well as the sport in the country, and they now have over 200,000 members and over 4,000 clubs affiliated. So really interested to hear all about the operations and the coaching, training and competitions that she organises nationally and internationally. So welcome to the show today, Pat.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
What we normally do is just try and get to know you a little bit better and just start from the start. So kind of where you grew up. I know obviously based in Manchester, Northwest at the moment, but not born and bred there, is that right?
No, born and bred in Birmingham. Yeah, in the city of Birmingham. And started my life, I suppose, really doing dance from a very early age, and then I was into tennis, athletics, and then ended up in cheerleading.
How was school life for you then? In terms of, I know you got into dance early. Was that through school or family, parents?
No, it was a family link. So from the age of 4, I was taken with another member of the family and just joined a dance group. So I started doing ballet, tap, jazz, everything a young girl wants to do and wants to be. And actually didn't do dance in school. At that time, they only did, I'm going to say, traditional sports. So we played tennis and netball, athletics, obviously, and hockey, hated hockey. But I continued all the way through with my dance education and got qualified. So at the age of 15, which you could have qualifications then all those years ago, got qualified at the age of 15 and actually started running a community group for youngsters for free. One evening a week it started, and then
so
2 evenings a week.
Was that kind of part of your dance class you were part of? You started delivering for them? Or was that independent to that?
Yeah, it was independent. I taken judo classes at the time, and it was in a community hall. And outside, there were a group of young people, male and female, that were just noses pressed up against the window. So we went out and had a chat with them. That was myself and some of the staff members there, just asking them if they were okay, would they like to come in and try it? And one of the youngsters said that they'd really like to dance, didn't want to do judo, but would really like to dance. So after that, I spoke to the staff members and said, well, I can run a dance class for you, which I then started to do.
So you're doing that alongside, obviously 15 years old, still being in school, etc. Did you, in terms of school life, going into sixth form, what did that look like? Were you doing A-level dance and thinking of a career in dance? Was it like an academic career that you were going to pursue at that point?
No, it was an academic career, actually, because, again, dance wasn't on the curriculum all those years ago. And so I started my A-levels and was going to be a drama teacher, English and drama teacher, because I was very much into drama as well in school. So did my first year of education for A-levels and was going to go to teacher training college. And I remember, because this was in the 70s, and we had a careers teacher who came in, or careers advisor as they were called then, who came in and basically told us we were all a waste of space, and unless we got our qualifications, nobody would want to employ us. We were unemployable. And I've always been a person where
did that teacher teach you, or did they just come in and make that judgment
no,
in an hour or so?
Yeah, they came in and made that judgment.
All right, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, a challenge is something I always take. I tried to make a positive of anything that negative. So I decided during the summer holidays that I'd apply for a job. So I applied for a job and got the job and didn't go back to finish my A-levels.
Right, so so year 12 finished then, and what was the job you went into then at that point?
Yeah, I actually went into insurance. Can you believe it? I
Right.
went into an insurance broker, but in my head, then I was thinking, well, actually, I can earn money, but that would then allow me to do what I really enjoyed doing, which was teaching dance, and not have to charge.
Right, so you can have that creative outlet, that kind of outside of work hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was still attending classes myself then. So as a performer, ended up being on TV quite a lot then, through things like, years ago it was called Come Dancing. I mean, it's Strictly now, but it was Come Dancing.
Yeah,
So I represented the Midlands and West 8 times in that particular programme, but I did other things as well. But I was able to do that because I had a full-time job that was paying me money, which allowed me then to do what I really loved doing, and that was dance, without having to worry about earning money.
And I guess back then, I don't know if it's different now as well, in terms of dance, having that as your hobby, I guess, or your passion outside of work. Was that an expensive pastime then? Obviously, I know there's costumes, etc., travel and stuff. If you didn't have that job, that full-time career, would you have been able to fund it, or was it more about being able to teach for free?
I think it was being able to teach for free because, again, back then, we used to have a group of people that, we were quite resourceful actually, a group of people that made the costumes. I ended up making costumes myself. We would pull together, and we didn't do fundraising all those years ago. It was a case of, right, well, who can afford this? Who can drive us to wherever it is that we need to go? And who's got this costume, or can we help make costumes? So it was more about my passion for it, I suppose, as a hobby was really good. But I desperately wanted to teach, and I found from a very early age that if I could teach somebody something, it might be something very simple, that actually gave me a bit of a buzz, because somebody could walk away from me after spending 10 minutes, 15 minutes with a tool that I'd given them. Now, I didn't see it as a tool all those years ago. I just saw that somebody maybe couldn't do. I remember teaching somebody, it's called a double wing. And somebody said to me, I'll never be able to do that. And in the space of a lunch break, I taught them how to do a double wing. And okay, it might not have been as a tap dancing technical term, but there might not have been a fantastic tap dancer, but actually I taught them something that they went away going, oh, I can do that. And actually it isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, so definitely building confidence as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's nervous the first time they do something, so if you can learn it in an hour, then it's going to...
Yeah.
It's good they could take it. In terms of the dance career, obviously TV work, and then you had your own classes you were running them for free. Did that develop into kind of your own school and a bit more of that, like a bit more structure, or was it just a singular class?
Yeah, well, I had my own dancing school then, called it Body Talk all those years ago. It's called Body Talk, and again, inner city Birmingham. And then I moved it to a church hall, and we started charging the young people, if they could afford it, 5 old pennies then. But the money went straight to the church. And I then was teaching 2 nights a week and a Saturday. And again, with those youngsters, I got them doing all kinds of things. TV, they were on Tiswas. Don't know if you ever know about that programme or heard about that programme. Chris Tarrant. Got them on Tiswas, got them on other TV productions, but actually got them out in the community. And as you said, it built their confidence, but it gave them skills, whether they were social skills of being able to talk to people, communicate well, or just arranging things. And we had sessions where we'd make costumes together. So, for example, we ended up with one particular routine where we were just wearing bin bags over a leotard underneath, and did whatever design they wanted to within their own or on their own bin bag, so that it was, they put something into it, but actually it cost us very little. So resourceful.
And this is right in the heart of the community, and no funding back then. Not joining
no funding,
Arts Council and all that type of stuff.
No funding.
I guess from my point of view, it's kind of doing the two at the same time. Did it ever cross over? So did you ever kind of feel like, I've had enough of insurance and I want to move on directly into dance? What was the kind of the pathway from there
to where I am now?
Yeah, so well, I mean, to getting into, I know we're going to get into cheerleading and moving to Manchester, etc. But yeah, I guess was the genesis of that?
No, I think they were very separate, and it was almost one being funded by one, or being able to earn a wage allowed me then to do different things. So, for example, Schwarzkopf, the hair people, hair production people, were doing a tour of the country, and they needed a choreographer and they needed models. So got a group of my friends together, I choreographed, and we did that, and we got paid just a small amount of money, but we toured the country doing different performances. And actually I ended up in Manchester, and that was my first time in Manchester itself, at the Ritz, and it was the Ritz nightclub, doing a hair show for Schwarzkopf. But then I also ended up at the Royal Albert Hall doing a performance at the Royal Albert Hall with Schwarzkopf. So I suppose, again, being able to earn money and not have to worry about where my next penny was coming from, although I was still living at home, again, made it easier for me to be able to give back to people. And that's always been my philosophy. If I can give back and if I can assist others make whatever it is they need to make of their own lives, that's what I'll do.
I guess back then, obviously no social media, because I can understand how this be getting noticed and spotted and invited in to do these other things. But in terms of back then, how were you being identified to do these shows like this Sports Cup? How would they find you? Or did you have to audition? I'm just curious in terms of how that would.
Schwarzkopf actually came through a very good friend of mine who was on the same dance team as me, but she was also my hairdresser. And she worked for a well-known hairdressing salon in Solihull then. And they were approached as a salon to be the main runners of the show itself. So, of course, they went to their staff and said, right, well, who do you know and how can we do it? So it was all pulled together. So even then, it was who you knew.
Obviously, strong focus on volunteering for yourself and over the years. In terms of the volunteer aspect, that's what kind of led you into cheerleading in the first place, right? Like kind of volunteering and creating an event?
Yeah, well, again, I was producing, I suppose. I'd choreographed and produced a fashion show, and that was at a nightclub in Stockport. And we ended up raising over £10,000 in one night for a local hospital, the baby units at the local hospital. But I had choreographed for many, many years. And part of everything had a scene. So we had a number of different scenes. And the one scene was a sporting scene. And we had a local sports outlet. And they gave us so many things, so many items to wear. And of course, we got basketballs. And then I'm thinking, a basketball team. So I got in touch with Manchester Giants and said, do you have any cheerleading uniforms that you can loan us, please? Because I'll always ring somebody up. I'll always ask the question, have you got any cheerleading uniforms that we can borrow, please, with pom-poms? And have you got any players that could come down and actually model for us? So they said yes to both. So on that particular night, we had 4 players that came down and they loaned us a couple of uniforms and some pom-poms. And I did what I thought then was a sports scene with finishing off with basketball. And unbeknownst to me, in the audience were the new marketing company for the Manchester Giants, because the Manchester Giants were just about to move to the arena, Manchester Evening News Arena. It was a 9X then. And at the end of the night, the lady came up to me and said, look, this is who I am. We'd like you to run the cheerleaders for the Manchester Giants when they go into the arena, because it's going to be a very big event. And I said, I don't know anything about cheerleading. So she said, well, that doesn't matter. What I've seen on the stage there is good enough for us. So I then had an interview with the CEO, or the chair actually of the Giants then, American guy. And they offered me a full-time job and they wanted me to give up everything else. And I said, no, I'm not prepared to take that. I'll have a part-time job so that I can still do everything else that I want to do. And they allowed me to do that.
So were you having to, starting in that job, were you having to develop the cheerleading squad or like recruit everyone and bring them all into the fold, or was there was already a group of?
No, I did it. I planned it. So planned it all, pulled in one of my dancers, because moving to Manchester, so when I left Birmingham, I had to give up my dancing school. I actually handed it over to somebody else, and sadly within 3 months it had folded. But I came up here, missed dancing so much, so started doing adult classes first and then started doing classes for young people then. And so I then looked at using some of those people. I was going to say my pinnacle, because some of them were really good dancers. They'd been professional dancers. So my head cheerleader was a young lady called Alison, and she then became my head cheerleader. And we sat down and decided what we were looking for, what we wanted them to do, expectations, and just went from there, did auditions, did second auditions, and then pulled the team together to then be the Manchester Giants cheerleaders, and even came up with the name. So it became Shooting Stars. and it was shooting because of the hoop. Spent a lot of time thinking about it. And then I looked at, once we got going, a junior program, which, I can come on to a little bit later. But
yeah, I mean, I was going to say, at that point, was it very much kind of the performance aspect? So obviously coming from dance into cheerleading and obviously running the auditions, and was it just for the performance of like the entry of the teams and celebrations at half time, etc.? Was it not really the competitions at that point?
No competition at all. It was all about performance. I knew nothing about basketball, so I had to learn about that and what the expectations were. But the great thing about that, I started working for the Giants in May, and in the August, the Manchester Giants moved to the MEN Arena, as it's known now. And I was the liaison officer for the Lovables, Chicago Lovables. So they came across to perform the tournament that was there, and we had 17,500 people there. So just at the first event.
The Chicago Lovables, that's the cheer squad for the Bulls, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Just framing it up for listeners. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 17,500 people watching.
Yeah, 17,500 people watching. Fantastic atmosphere. But these girls were something else. Very professional, fantastic dancers, had a fantastic work ethic, were very good communicators. They set the bar for me then. I mean, I already had quite a high bar anyway, but they set the bar in terms of what I felt we could do for the Giants. And as I say, I was their liaison officer for 2 weeks. They had a week up in Manchester, then a week in London. And their director, Kathy Core, is still a good friend of mine to this day.
And so I guess they set the blueprint for what you wanted to do with the Giants from then. Is that where you kind of started, obviously, bringing in the other programs? You've got Shooting Stars, Rising Stars with the juniors, etc. Is that where that all came from?
Yeah, and again, looking at what they had, because they had a model which was the Lovables and the junior Lovables. So spent a lot of time looking at how they developed it. It was quite different again in the States because there was a lot of sponsorship around for them, whereas not so much in this country.
So were they professional then? Sorry, were they professionals then when they came up? Like,
no.
Would they be employed as by the team or?
Well, yeah, but they used to get $20 a game.
Right, so he could, not a full-time job,
No, and they came from all different walks of life. So you would have a doctor, you would have a school teacher, all different walks of life, but their passion was performing.
Got it. Yeah, so sorry, I cut you off there when you're going into around your setting up the junior section and building up that format for the club.
Yeah, well, again, it was about performance. So we had the Shooting Stars perform at all the home games. Crowd loved them. Youngsters were up on the feet. They bought pom-poms because they were being sold by the merchandisers. And then I spoke to the general manager about starting a junior programme. And he actually said, no, he didn't want that. He only wanted the seniors. So I said, well, I'm going to start a junior programme anyway. I told you earlier, a challenge for me is not a challenge. No, we don't want that. So I said, right, well, I'm going to do that. But I looked at, we're a shooting star, right? What comes before? Yeah, so I set up the juniors and looked at even the different age groups and thought about it so that we had the youngsters that were called twinkles, they're the little stars. Then we had the comets, who were a little bit bigger. And then we had an astro, they were bigger. And then you would become a shooting star. So rising stars would become a shooting star. So again, it was a development of a whole programme, really, and a development of a person's life. Looking at, they might start with me at the age of 5, and at the age of 18, 20, they could become, and some of them have, full-time coaches.
So, yeah, so that pathway, you've built that pathway of obviously seeing what the Americans were doing and building it and looking up the community that was around you and how that worked. So at that point, were you affiliated to another body then at that point?
No.
Just trying to bring onto UKCA and stuff at the moment. Where did that come in?
Right.
At that time, you were just like the pioneer in the country, really the only ones doing it.
Yeah, well, I knew nothing about competitive cheerleading. I knew nothing about it. I'd been in competitive dance as a youngster, but knew nothing about cheerleading. And one of my cheerleaders actually came to me the one day and said, look, there's a competition down. It was in Bognor Regis. It's a competition down in Bognor Regis. Can we compete? Can we go? So spoke to the management and they said, yeah, it'd be really good. You can represent the Giants. And again, there wasn't any money back then, but actually we used to get free McDonald's vouchers. So we were fine because for 3 days we'd got McDonald's vouchers. I mean, that would be frowned upon now. They helped us with some of the funding for the transport. But other than that, it was, we were on our own. And we went down and it was actually a British Cheerleading Association. So it was a BCA comp. So for the first time, and I thought all cheerleading was what we were doing, and that's NBA style. So we went to the competition, we actually won the competition, but I then saw the other side of cheerleading, which is the stunting and the tumbling.
Just to frame that up as well for anyone listening who's not familiar, the different styles, so NBA style and then the kind of stunts and comp style, what's the main difference, I guess, or how would you describe the two?
NBA is pure dance. So it's pure dance, and it might be hip hop, it might be lyrical, it could be any style of dance. The other style of cheerleading, the stunts and the tumbles, which everybody knows as cheerleading, that's most people know as cheerleading, has a small element of dance in it, but it's stunting and tumbling, arm motions, jumps, all very, very synchronized, very much like, there's a crossover with some of the skills. So synchronization, timing, transitions, all of those kind of things cross over. But you've got one that is ground bound, stays on the floor, it's dance. Okay, we do jumps, but it's dance. You very seldom do any climbing on top of each other because you might lift somebody, but you don't climb. And the other one is very much linked to gymnastics.
Got it. And that's the one we'd see in the recent Netflix show and popularised in movies, etc. So, you went to the competition, you won that competition with NBA style at that competition at that point.
Yeah.
You saw the other style.
Yeah, and I wanted to learn more about it. So then started looking at whether I could get education in this country, and there wasn't any. There was no education, no formal education at all. So the following year, we went back to that competition, and there was a workshop after the competition that was being run by the 4 Americans that were the judges, and that was the stunting. So my dancers were then trying stunting, and it was really interesting because you had these big guys, these very, strapping guys who were saying, right, this is how you do a stunt, but actually didn't break it down. They were brute strength, lifting somebody up and helping us to do it. But as soon as they walked away, we couldn't do it because we didn't have the technique.
Right.
So in my head then, I'm thinking, right, well, in dance, I've got all my qualifications in dance. I know the technique. I know how to achieve whatever it is I need to do. But in cheerleading, I don't know how to do that. So I went abroad, I went to Japan, I went to America, and I went to Germany, went to Poland to learn the skills, really, of cheerleading.
Wow. And then, who are you learning it from then? Like, are you going to certain clubs and organise that? You said you went to Japan and Germany. Are they obviously hotspots for the sport at that time?
Yeah, but they were only, in Germany, for example, there were clubs. So Berlin, they were a very good club, and they'd had an American coach in teaching them. But it wasn't really far-reaching. In Japan, I actually went to, it was a body that were looking to set up an international federation, but they'd already got a national federation. So again, went along to one of their events to have a look at that. And America went along to UDA, UCA, which is the Universal, which is all part of now what is the body. Went along 2 of their competitions, just looking at those, and just joined in with some of the workshops. But you didn't get a formal qualification that gave you any recognition in this country. And that's where, again, my head started working, thinking, right, how can I make this more accessible for people in this country? And how can we give people opportunities in this country, but still keep it safe?
At that point, and this is just out of curiosity, obviously, there's just to frame up what year this was. This is early 2000?
No, I'm still in the 90s here.
So in the 90s, there's from an insurance point of view, right? So we're doing lifts, tumbles, stunts. Nowadays, obviously, you need a qualification to get insurance, etc. What was the scene like back then in terms of that?
You didn't think about it. You didn't have insurance.
This wasn't on the agenda, yeah.
No, you didn't worry about insurance. If you fancied doing it, you did it, and you did it at your own risk. It certainly isn't how it is now.
Yeah, different world nowadays, I guess.
Yeah, but you look back and actually you could cringe now with some of the things that happened then. However, that was how you learned, and if you had a tumble or, you had an injury, well, that was it. My dance background, again, gave me a lot of tips for training, but in terms of learning the skill, this is why I needed to learn a little bit more. And I came back and actually so that's the end of the 90s. And then we were invited then to a UKCA competition, and that was in Wales, in Pwllheli in Wales. And I went along to watch that, and again, I could see the stunting and the dance. And the person who was in charge of UKCA at the time then said, look, I can't keep this going? Because she was running one event a year. I can't keep this going. Is that something that you will take on? So I said, oh, okay, I'll do that. And the rest is history, really.
Yeah, so I mean, at that point, I guess it's a good time to try and frame up the environment. So you've got the two, because when I look at it as well, it's almost a bit like boxing. You know, you've got all the different federations and they're all kind of doing their own thing, but it's the same sport.
Yeah.
At that point, I know you mentioned, is it BCA, UKCA? Is that the two main ones in the UK at that?
Yeah. BCA and UKCA were the two that were sort of running parallel then. And even from the beginning, I used to speak to the guy who was running that frequently, and I was trying to pull the two together. You know, can we work together? Can we just do it as one? Because actually, why have we got two? The sport is very small. And even then, we didn't think about it being a sport. We thought about it being an activity. And it's very small. Can we work together? And it was just very obvious that there was history even before I was around, and they just weren't going to pull together. So I got involved with UKCA, and then I was working with them. Well, I'm say working. A young girl that came to my cheerleading, my Rising Stars program, her father was head of the youth sports competitions in Manchester. A gentleman called Tony Rose was involved for many, many years. And Tony sat down with me and he said, look, we need to formalise a structure for the organisation. And we did that at the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s, so that it had a committee. It had all of the constitution. It had all of the things that actually we haven't had before then.
Prior to that, was it just being run by a passionate founder who was just running it on it, basically?
Yeah, well, it was actually, my understanding is that it was a group of 4 people, first of all, that got together. They fell out, which is why the 2 groups then started. And then the person that was running UKCA, it was a guy who then said, look, I can't run this, so handed it over to a lady called Sharon Barson. Sharon then held it for so long. So it's almost, we've been passing the baton.
Yeah.
Been passing the baton for the activity. Sharon passed it to me, and yeah, we are where we are now.
So I know you said at that point you kind of considered it as an activity rather than a sport, but I understand been on a journey to be recognised as a sport, I guess, ever since then. Where does that sit at the moment? I know obviously you've been done a lot of work around it. The last I heard, is cheerleading part of the Olympics now? Is that an Olympic sport or not?
Well, it's on that pathway, but it's not an Olympic recognised sport.
Right. Okay.
And it will only be, and for the next 2 Olympics, excluding Tokyo, it will only be a demonstration sport, not a competitive sport.
Right. So it's going to take place in Paris, but not competitive.
Yeah.
Right. Got it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of the background of that, I know you've got BCA, UKCA, and I guess recognition from Sport England, etc. In terms of funding, that's going to cause a problem if you've got 2 competing or 2 separate bodies. You don't benefit from anything. Would you benefit from anything from Sport England?
No funding at all. And ironically, I've actually been on the website today. What it has done, it's opened up the activity so the clubs can actually get funding. The clubs can get community funding. But as an organisation, any organisation, we can't get funding because it's not a recognised sport. And they have tried, Sport England have tried to pull us together. But I go back to those early days in the 2000s and I've got, all the documentation where we go to Sport England and they say, right, you need to have 2,000 members. So we get more than 2,000 members, we go back. They say, now you need to have 5,000 members. So we get that and we go back. Then they say, you have to be part of an international federation. You've got to have a pathway. So we do all of that and then we go back. And then they say, well, actually, part of what you do is gymnastics, which, is where the whole British gymnastic episode comes into this, because they then said, well, part of what you do is gymnastics. And actually, they would be best placed to be your governing body. So instead of resisting at that point and saying, well, we want to be independent, my board said, well, actually, let somebody govern it, because at the moment we've got people out there, because this is when insurance started to come in and duty of care. They said that at the moment there isn't any governance, or there's a lack of, not there isn't any, there's a lack of governance. So let's go in with British Gymnastics, let them be the governors of it, and then actually it will put the activity in a better place, and it could then open up the doors for things like, Olympic status and everything else. So we joined British Gymnastics, and I spent 3 very tough years at Lilleshall. They wanted to employ me, and again, I wouldn't be employed by them. because I didn't want to just hand over everything, and being an employee, everything then that I produced, I would have had to have handed over to them. And I just felt that it wasn't fair on the activity. So we were in for 3 years, and then the outgoing CEO put me in front of Jenny Price. We had a meeting with Jenny Price, and he said, British gymnastics is killing this sport. We're strangling it. They need to be set free. So she actually said, right, well, come out then. So we reversed back out again.
Oh, wow. So because I remember this, but this is, I'm trying to cast my mind back. Is it probably 2010, 11, that type of time?
Well, between 8 and 11, yeah.
8 and 11, yeah. I suppose when they're saying stifling it, is that more, obviously gymnastics, well established, got an established format, etc., and framework. Is it almost that they were trying to impose that onto UK? Basically, it wasn't a good fit for the sport.
No, but at the time we didn't know it was a good fit. I mean, we always refer to British gymnastics as the Liberian tanker, very strong, steadfast, but very slow to move. We're the speedboat. So we can react and we can move very quickly because we don't have the same kind of mechanism that they've got in place. And at the beginning, I was really excited because I thought this is really great. Worked with some of their top guys in education, looked at, I pulled together the resources with one of their guys that went into schools, the next steps, resources that went into schools. And that was really good. But on the other hand, we were running the events. They didn't support us with the events. They still wanted us as volunteers to run the activity. And actually, the diehards within gymnastics considered that we were a watered down version of their discipline.
Okay, so obviously culturally it's not going to be a great fit.
No.
Yeah, you mentioned schools there. So schools program at that point, I know you were doing that previously with the Giants, but I guess what's the scope at the moment in terms of school participation, I guess in cheerleading in general, but with UKCA particularly?
Well, if we go back to in 2003, so in 2000, I'm going to start 2000, we were given the opportunity to do an after-school club in 2 of the East Manchester schools because they were in the same area as what is now Man City Stadium, which was the Commonwealth Games Stadium, ahead of the Commonwealth Games in 2002, to pilot after-school clubs to see whether they worked. And from that, 2003, Oldham, which is one of the 10 boroughs of Manchester, got funding for it to go into each of their schools. And that was then when they sent a teacher or a TA or a volunteer onto our courses. They went into the schools to actually start delivering. So then there were no coaching fees that they had to pay on a regular basis. And then we would have a competition for them, which is what started the whole national schools competition in the end. Because we did that in several areas. And we found that suddenly there were a lot of schools around that were doing cheerleading, and we pulled them together for a national competition. In terms of what's happening now, it's very much dependent on the head teacher as to whether they want it as one of their sports. They have the opportunity to have curriculum time activity of cheerleading, because at the moment, again, because it straggles dance and gymnastics, it can sit in between or in both, whichever they want it to.
Yeah.
It had a time as a GCSE qualification and an A-level qualification, but then because it wasn't a recognised sport, it was taken back off curriculum again. So, we've got thousands of youngsters that are involved in school, whether it's curriculum time or after-school clubs.
In terms of clubs, affiliated clubs, just under UKCA, I've got that right, 4,000 plus.
Yeah, we've got over 4,000 clubs that are affiliated. But the thing with the schools, again, they don't have to affiliate to us. So once we've educated them, and we've educated over 10,500 coaches in our time.
Got it.
So from 2000 to now, over 10,500 coaches have got our qualification.
So I guess it's hard to track. So the scope of it could actually be 10 times what we're thinking, because of the amount of resources and qualified people are out there. It could be running, and if a teacher wants to run a session after school, they don't need to inform you of it. So it could be thousands of those sessions happening all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And there's no way of collecting that data, because if they're doing that within their own school and they're not pulling in coaches as well, they've got their own data, but unless they're collecting that, they might collect it again within their own area, but it's where that information then goes. At one time, Youth Sport Trust used to collect that data. Don't know whether they still do. Because again, we were part of a development programme with the Youth Sport Trust for a number of years. So, landscape's very different. But what we did when we came out of British Gymnastics, because before we went in, you had to be a member of UKCA. You paid a fee. At that time it was £5, but you paid a fee, covered your insurance, and it covered, and that's for competition as well as training. And it also gave you an ID badge, but it allowed you then access to the competition. Went in with British Gymnastics. British Gymnastics fees were far higher. So our guys went from a £5 fee to a £17.50 fee. And when we came out, they'd just taken a new membership fee from them in the October, and we came out in the December. So we made a commercial decision, if you like, that we couldn't charge them. We didn't want to charge them because we'd be charging them twice for the same thing. And from then, we've never taken a membership from people. So it's just the people that are logged onto our system, that come to our events, that are part of our, if you like, our network. That's how we've got the numbers that we've got so far. But we know there are an awful lot more that just want to do recreational cheerleading, that don't have to affiliate to anybody.
I mean, so the 4,000 clubs, like, what would an average club look like in terms of where they're based? I guess size of membership, are there many?
Anything from, well, you've got a small one, which might just be one team. It might be a senior team, for example, so they might all be over 18, and it might be 12 people. That would be smallest, and then you've got others that are in excess of 200 members. Wow.
And I mean, I know that the pathway is strong in terms of, I guess you've got a big scene in universities as well. Like university unions tend to all have a cheerleading setup as well, don't they? So
yeah. And then the other end of that as well, you've got masters now that are competing at both national level and European level. So the masters, they had to be over 25, but you had to have 3/4 of your team that were over 25. But we've got people now in their 50s and 60s that are competing.
Yeah, I was going to say masters is a bit for a 26-year-old. Make them feel bad to sit at masters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of UKCA as it is at the moment, and obviously might have been affected, like everyone, been affected by the pandemic, especially being in indoor sport predominantly. What does it look like for the next 5 years, 10 years? What's your kind of outlook or mission for the next 5 years?
We want to do a drive again on development, because we know that a number of our clubs have suffered. Some of the clubs have closed, and some of the coaches are now, I've got one that's an Amazon driver right now, for example, and she had a very successful club, but couldn't find funding to keep it.
Yeah, I was going to say on that, did that affect the ability, obviously, so with the setup and things like that, with the federation, did that affect their ability to access any of the fund, like the COVID specific funding that was announced, through Sport England and other places?
It has affected them because, again, and going on their website today, you have to be affiliated to a governing body, and we're not a governing body. There isn't a governing body for cheerleading. So unless some of the funding you could go for, and as I say, that those are normally the local pots, but in terms of what Sport England were offering, there were restricted pots of funding for people that weren't linked to governing bodies.
Do you see that changing in the future in terms of, I know we've not delved too much into it, but in terms of maybe coming together again in the future? I guess never say never, is it? Or
I would hope so. I would really hope so, because this sport deserves better than this. The sport actually deserves a better recognition, and it deserves better governance. So if you're going to bring your brother, your sister to cheerleading, you would want to know that qualifications are in place, insurance is in place, and actually, if you've got any safeguarding issues, there's somewhere to take those. Well, for a club, they have to take them to the local LADO, for example, because there isn't a governing body. I mean, the number of calls that we used to have, and they were weekly, from either concerned parents or concerned individuals who would say, look, we've got this issue at this club, and we would say, well, we can guide you on this, but actually we can't intervene, we can't be involved in it because we're not the governing body. Now, if it was a club where we knew the coach and we knew that actually we could give guidance, we would absolutely do that. Absolutely. But, it's not like going to a governing body, for example, of athletics, where you could say, this particular club is not being run properly. So what can you do about it? You've got your governing body that could do something about it.
Yeah, and they've got the standards they hold every club against, etc. I mean, I'm just thinking about the numbers. 200,000 members is not a small group of members. And then if you've got another body with similar numbers, if you bring together, it's And like you said, with the sport, it does kind of fill that niche, because obviously it's about predominantly female sport, but there's a massive drop off in early secondary school with girls
Yeah, yeah.
involved in sports. As I guess there's huge opportunity, if we can tap into it, or maybe they come together, like I said.
Yeah, and I think, it's all very well us running parallel lines, but actually it doesn't help the athletes and it doesn't help the sport, because once recognition comes, and, whatever guise that might be, and, I've talked about other people passing the baton to me, and, I've tried to pass the baton to other people, and it might be that we go, well, actually, the baton needs to go wherever it needs to go. The only thing that my board, and I've got some key people on my board, we cannot, hand on heart, pass over to a commercial organisation in America, because that's ostensibly what we would be doing by signing up to what they want, who then takes advantage of what's going on in this country. And, you've seen that with other sports, whether that be lacrosse or, American football. They run things in a very, very different way. And actually, we need to look after the sport on a national level, affiliate to whoever you need on a world level, international level. But let's get something sorted out in this country where actually we're in charge of our own sport.
Yeah, definitely. So in charge of how it needs to be in the UK, but then, yeah, if you want to get into those international competitions, then I'll have that pathway to go through.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Just changing direction slightly, just to focus a little bit more on yourself. Obviously, you been in the sport for over 20 years and built up the membership. Really interested in to know kind of how people and how leaders essentially plan that. So I don't know if when you first started out, whether you had you sat down and wrote it all out on a piece of paper to say where you want to be in maybe not 2020, but did you have a vision at the time, or was it almost like as you kind of went along, things built onto what you'd done previously?
I actually had a vision, and I've got a book from the year 2000, and on the one page, it's everything that I wanted for the sport. Fantastic. And with the exception of formal recognition, everything else has been achieved as my vision then. And it's like shifting sand, isn't it? When other opportunities come, you've got to look at, well, is that going to work for the activity? Is that going to work for the young people? And I just look at everything that we do has got to be an opportunity for somebody, whether that is to participate in something which makes them fitter, healthier, or whether they have the ability through whatever it is that they're doing to actually earn a living. So for me, we've still got shifting sand. It still moves. So something else might come up where we say, okay, we need to move in that direction. And that's where, again, I come back to speedboat rather than Liberian tanker. But yeah, all those years ago, I had the vision. I certainly didn't when I started with Manchester Giants in the mid-90s. Certainly didn't. It was all about an entertainment opportunity. But I suppose my role grew. And what I saw were particularly young females at that time that had a lack of confidence, but also a lack of opportunity. They don't have that now. And if I have somebody, so for example, today I said that I needed to finish at a certain time because I'm going to the final Manchester Giants game tonight. I'm the COVID officer for the Manchester Giants and have been for the whole season. That's elite basketball. But actually, what I've done is I've brought in some, and I'm going to say young volunteers, 2 of them from a university, 1 of them that is still at college, who want to go into sports management, who want to be involved. One young lady wants to be a PE teacher. So I've got them involved. Although cheerleading has not had any events, I've brought them into basketball while I've been involved, for the last year, actually. And they've helped me. The 2 girls that are at university have helped me pull together the whole COVID document. And that, again, helps them with their planning. And both of those girls have now got jobs. So they haven't quite finished university yet, but they've both got jobs. And their CV, apparently, and they were both told that their CV jumped out at the people that were looking at the CVs because of what they've done. So, yeah, it's about opportunity.
Definitely. And you mentioned competitions. I was interested in terms of, obviously, COVID and everyone's been shut down. How have you pivoted on that? Have you been able to run any competitions or gone online, gone virtual? What's the setup at the moment?
No, we've gone online for virtual coaching education to a level. We could only do the lower level. We can't do the higher level because that's absolutely hands-on, because we consider, again, you need to look at your checks and balances on that one. No, we're looking to run a virtual competition in July. That's just so that when everybody's back in June, I mean, we've got obviously adults going back in May, but we're still following government guidance. So we're still saying no contact, no stunting. We're saying you can't do that until June. So we're saying end of July, if you want to enter a virtual competition as groups, you can do that. And we're not looking at face-to-face until December.
Fantastic. And one thing I always ask is, obviously, over your time leading the organisation, etc., have you developed anything, any kind of philosophies or approaches to leading the sport for yourself or leading your team?
I suppose it's always, I think it's very much do as I ask others to do. So nothing is too menial. So again, for example, I will be the first one at the basketball today to set up. I don't expect others to do the menial tasks and me just swan in. Don't do that. So always get your hands dirty, always be prepared to be part of the team, give guidance, give support, make the standards that raise the bar high, but actually go together. So it's always about being that team that will work together, and actually we can achieve more. So, the believe, achieve is always about, believing something, you can achieve it and never give up. So again, go for a challenge. Somebody says you can't do something, we'll find a way around it and we can do it.
Yeah, love that. Using that as the motivator. Really like that one. Do you have any routines or any habits that you use for yourself, like daily things, whether it's reading for mindfulness or set time exercise or whatnot? Is there anything that you do on a day-to-day?
Day-to-day basis, I like music playing and I do sit and read, and quite an eclectic choice actually. So, but yeah, I like music in the background because it tends to, I think, calm the mood. Yeah. So, I don't have the heavy stuff going. I tend to have, something nice and smooth playing in the back.
I suppose if you had anything with a bit up tempo, you might be tempted to get up and dance. I guess.
Yeah, well, funny enough, I do, because I'm an exercise teacher. And again, during the pandemic, that stopped, and I decided not to do Zoom sessions because part of my other role, my other hat, is chair of a domestic abuse organisation. So during the pandemic, I've actually been very much hands-on, delivering food, delivering clothes, making sure that people are settled in new houses and all kinds of things like that. So when I play what I call up-tempo music, music that's got a good beat to it, I absolutely want to dance because that's my background. That's where I started. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Pat. I've just got one question for you. We always ask is if you could go back and speak to your younger self, so before you started out, maybe at 17 when you had that careers advisor come in, if you could go back and give yourself a bit of advice, what would it be if you could speak to your younger self?
I think it would be to believe in to believe in yourself.
I think you've carved your own path, haven't you? You've done it your own way, haven't you? So I guess.
Yeah, well, I was going to say I'm flummoxed really, because would I go back and change anything? I feel really sad that I gave my dancing school up, but actually I needed to because I needed to move here to Manchester. Would I have enjoyed being in a school? No, because actually I'm teaching a smaller group of people than I've had the ability to teach now. So actually, I don't think I'd go back to change very much at all. Yeah. I would hope going forward that I can still help people and still be, I'm going to use the word inspiration, but actually that's probably not the right word. If anybody needs anything, I would always hope that my door's open, my ears are open, and actually I give people good guidance.
Yeah, I love that. No, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate all of your insight and walking us through the history of the cheerleading in the UK.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice to meet you. It's always, I never want to speak to people like that. I don't want to go anywhere with an attitude like that. So I learned from that. So actually that experience taught me not to be like that.
Yeah, exactly. I think, it's one of those like sliding doors, I suppose. That moment when someone tells you can't do it and you want to...
Yeah, I'll prove you wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Go back and stick it to them. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, and really appreciate your time. And
thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.